Energy versus the climate. I'm Ben Fajzullin, reporting from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, here to talk to experts about efforts to transition from fossil fuels to renewables and protect the planet. This is the 8th time the Arctic Base Camp is here warning world leaders about the climate crisis. Are they listening? And are the biggest polluters really willing to go green like they say they are? I'm here with Arctic scientists Susanna and Arthi to talk about Arctic change. What have you noticed on the ground? You've been to the Arctic, both of you.
I think what I notice is how quickly things are changing. I mean, to give an example of this, I ski across polar ice caps, and I had one time where we saw a glacier river, which is basically a glacial outburst flood coming up from under the glacier. We wanted to stop to take a photo of it, and we realized we actually wouldn't get off the sea ice. We're right on the edge of the sea ice on the glacier, and we would not get off the sea ice if we stopped to take that picture. And for me, just realizing we had the camera out, but we're talking change that's happening immediate and happening now, and it's very, very, what's the word? Jarring, and realizing that we're not talking about change over decades. We're not talking about change over years. We're talking change that is immediate. So it makes the Arctic really exciting for me, but also a very scary region to study as well.
Something that a lot of people aren't seeing happening. It must be amazing to see something like that, but at the same time, scary. What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Susanna, I think a biggest thing is change, in like weeks and days even. And so once when I was up in the Arctic, we were trying to find sea ice in places that used to have sea ice, but, that just wasn't there anymore. And we found some. And when we went on to the ice camp, basically the ice was about 30 centimeters thick. And we had people, their legs were falling through the ice, and, below you is like 4,000 meters of super cold water. And that really gets to you because you realize how that change is imminent. It's happening right now. And it's also, causing global risks around the world. What's happening in the Arctic isn't just staying there. And I think also another thing for me is that I feel like we often forget that a lot of people live in the Arctic, and that it's really important, and it's a place where there's a lot of culture, there's a lot of heritage, there's a lot of livelihoods. And so changes in Arctic sea ice, changes in permafrost, all of these things are affecting the people who live there now. And, we can't wait to really make any changes. We just have to do something right now, basically. Action needs to be immediate, I think.
What if change comes in drilling, in looking for resources in this region?
I mean, that's a big problem, and we're kind of in a little bit of a catch-22, because there's certainly the interest in some of these minerals that we need for our green technology transitions. But it gets into how are we looking for them, where are we looking for them? It's no coincidence in our colonialist history of the world that, we're looking for minerals in indigenous territory. We're also looking for them in the ocean right now. We just had some increased interest in deep sea mining, and some that's just gotten legislation through last week. And, the ocean, you start drilling in there, and it's a Pandora's box, and very hard to control. We know that it affects the ecosystem. We don't fully understand how badly it affects the ecosystem, all of the negative consequences, other than likely there are some significant ones. And Arthi talks about the loss of sea ice. The sea ice isn't just the ice, it's an ecosystem, and it's at the base of a food chain. So we're affecting globally. But, when we go and drill, and we are drilling in indigenous territory, it's destroying their livelihoods. And there are 4 million people who live in this region. And so it's got real consequences. If you drill in the ocean and something goes wrong, there's no infrastructure. It's very hard to get help and react to disasters. And the ocean, just like the air, doesn't have physical boundaries. So a disaster that happens somewhere can get spread very widely, very quickly, and very hard to control.
So Arthur, your message to leaders here gathered in Davos?
My message would be that we need to act now. Putting it off just means that we're going to get ourselves in a worse situation. And in some ways, these consequences are exponential. The longer we wait, the harder it's going to get. And we can't change things that are irreversible. And so I would say for, everyone, ecosystems, people, business, culture, we need to act now because tomorrow's too late.
And I'm here with Professor Gail Whiteman, who's the founder of the Arctic Base Camp. How bad is the situation now? We're hearing about tipping points, irreversible change. Just paint a picture for us.
Well, it's great to be back at Davos. We've been camping here since 2017 to try and bring the message that the Arctic is the barometer of global risk. It's warming four times faster than the rest of the planet. And what we know is that the global climate system has 16 tipping points. 9 of those are in the polar regions. And 5 of the 6 that will tip before we get at a +2 degree world are in the polar regions. The situation's bad. It's code red.
Are you getting your message across to the world? And what about the crowd here, which is very special in Davos?
Yeah, well, we chose to come to Davos as our flagship event many years ago because we wanted to speak science to power. And I think it's been a sea change since 2017. We've certainly changed the conversation around polar risk. It's no longer about how do we get at those resources of oil and gas or minerals or just geopolitical risk, which still exists. But what we're really looking at is just trying to explain how the rest of the world, the fate of humanity, really depends on the poles. And I think the forum is definitely listening.
What about specific countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, which aims for 50% of renewables by 2030 in comparison to some European countries that are aiming for 100?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the whole point, that nobody is doing enough. We know that emissions keep rising. We know that we are on the wrong trajectory, and we have to collectively actually get back to that safe space. So without question that we cannot expand oil and gas development anywhere in the world. We know that with the IEA, they've said it for a long time, no new oil and gas development. That's not activism, that's just science, that's just economics. We have to stop drilling.
But some of these Gulf states are looking for new markets. They are developing new markets of their own. And some of those new markets may be in regions like the poles.
Right, exactly. And so absolutely not in fragile regions. That's probably one of the most dangerous things that you can do. But I think more importantly, they've been fighting against fossil fuel phase out in the UN meetings. And that is, phase down, phase out. We have to go deeper, faster and farther. And I think the poles are the wake-up call saying it's happening now, it's real, and it's alarming.
But are the alarm bells ringing loud enough for global leaders and participants here in Davos? For almost a week, this little alpine village hosts the highest density of decision makers in the world. They can unlock a dizzying amount of investment to launch whatever innovation you may want. The latest planet-saving renewables, for example. Head of the United Nations Development Program, Achim Steiner, says we've got a lot to learn when it comes to the energy transition. Mr. Steiner, what is key in this transition?
Policy. I think if we look at the developing world today as leaders in the energy transition, we can look from China to India, we can look to Kenya, we can look to Costa Rica, Brazil. All of these countries took very deliberate decisions to invest in an energy transition. But what is also becoming evident in today's world is that finance is critical. Particularly for the African continent, finance has become an absolute constraint. And perhaps the biggest enabler or disabler of the energy transition is going to be the continued use of fossil fuel subsidies. $7 trillion of taxpayers' money is being used to make oil, gas and coal artificially cheaper, and therefore making it more difficult for renewable energy, low-carbon energy technologies to succeed in the marketplace.
At the same time, is it fair to the planet, fair to our futures, to say that indebted countries have it harder to meet the needs of this transition?
Absolutely, and particularly in the global financial context we see right now, for least developed countries and developing economies, the debt burden, the interest rates, and the amount of money they have to expend just on servicing their debt clearly immediately constrains their ability to invest in an energy transition. We need to look at a global energy economy through the financial lens of essentially a shared interest in investing in rapid transitions. This is where we are failing right now, particularly a continent like Africa, which in the already taking place energy revolution right now is receiving less than 3 to 4% of global total investments. This is what is actually creating a distortion in the future of our energy markets.
So what needs to change?
I think on the one hand, we have to address domestic policy. The more countries are able to review their regulatory regime, their domestic finance environment, that is critical. Secondly, we have to look at fossil fuel subsidies. And thirdly, we have to look particularly in the international financial markets, in development cooperation, but also in the energy sector themselves, to invest more proactively in these energy transitions. The future is going to be low carbon. The longer we delay this, the more expensive the transition becomes.
A huge lender is China. How would you judge its green transition?
Domestically, China is today the largest producer of wind power technology, of solar technology. It has invested more than any other country in actually making the energy transition happen domestically. It still has a significant dependence on coal. But we also see in countries like India, big economies in the emerging economy world, being major investors in energy transitions, in renewable energy infrastructure today. The way they will now engage and also finance these investments in their partnerships with other countries will obviously play a crucial role. But let's remember, China has also helped to bring the cost per unit of a solar panel or a wind power turbine down. This has opened up the possibilities for Africa to invest in itself. And that's why you see a country like Kenya today producing over 90% of its electricity with renewables.
Achim Steiner, thank you very much.
Thank you.